in 3, 2, 1. 2 points in my speech. First, how the people are going to be hurt by the constitutional laws that will not let them evolve by time. Second point is going to be more principle, why we have morally only defined, the laws are only defined by the people right now and not generally when they could be. So let's begin first by rebuttal. What we got from opening government is mainly like the idea that now rules are going to be better for me. Why, let's say, like less racism, less religion and such. And they already got from POI, from Amitai, that they are going to have problems with this. Like, for example, first from the past, yes, because there are like, you now get all of your constitutional values are still stuck in the past, just like in the United States. I will get to it later in my analysis. But second point is also that we are still in a functioning democracy, which meaning that now still in all of those bad situation life democracies, which are just now trying to evolve to a better place for the people, where the laws are just now trying to change for them, we are still in the situation on your side, and this is why it's so bad. We also got something about like that I know that the law is with me. If we are just now going to describe that the law is actually going to be still against you in many cases, and it cannot even change, then you will not even try to change them actively, which is also horrible. Let's go to the cases. First, how does the constitutional value of the law, which is likely to be implemented, going to hurt people? First, we think that we can just analyze how it's going to look like. People are going to assume that the laws are there forever, they are there to stay. It means that, for example, I will now, as a lawmaker, will see the Constitution as a big value that I am afraid of changing. I think that this was done by people who are magnificently smarter than me, who have already thought about what the general situation should be, and therefore I cannot even have the ability to think about it and to change it myself. We also think that it will be like in the law itself harder to change it. They will probably say like you need a vast majority in order to change it, because we believe that the current situation is like morally correct no matter what actually will happen. We also believe that it's going to be implemented to the people, that the law is now actually going to be so much like it, because that, for example, the media is likely to say that the Constitution is so great and it cannot be changed because of how that the law is perceived in the judicial system itself. Yeah. So how exactly do the people get hurt by it? We think that, for example, we have like white colonialism in the United States that will still have its root and hard to pick them out from, because they now have a major constitution that is being seen as like the right thing, something that cannot like even be challenged to be different from it. We also think that things that are more toward rich people in European countries are now going to be harder to change, because this is what has already happened historically, and it's something that like generally doesn't really only happen there, but in all of the world at all. We also think that like there are many things that are going to be changed more, and we think that the rules that we get now are generally just better than before, because that we have also first learned from our experience. It means that, for example, we've seen how that the law that we made has changed, and it isn't really relevant to now, and we know exactly what could happen and what could not after so many years that we've seen it in action. We know that the law actually interacts with the people in reality and can be changed by the values of the people who change by time. And we also think that just like generally as a society, we are moving slowly to a situation where we are more accepting towards towards minorities, and this is like generally a good thing for us to apply to. So our bottom lines are going to be that in their side, they're going to have a lot harder time about changing laws that are just so ancient, like let's say death sentences, and like seeing people as 3/5 of a person, like, which is completely horrible, and also like that the demography is probably going to be stuck through the years, and we are not going to be like adjusted to things that are changing like technology, let's say like GPT and such going to us.
Yeah.
Okay, closing.
It is much easier to change a law that you believe that should represent some sort of a universal truth than something that you feel like the majority of the people feel like is true.
It's easier to change a rule that is actually being seen as something that everyone agrees on and was already considered to be always lasting. I don't really think so, and I didn't really get an analysis, so I can't just say only just I don't really understand it. Now let's get to the second point, principal case. Why do we think that like just morally there is not really something which is not morally defined by the people right now. We believe that just like in the end of the day, any rule is made by a necessity. You have seen that there is like a conflict between some people, or a wish that you want to happen, and it hurts another entity, and you believe that because of it, there is a need to make something change in the way that our society functions. It means that any law that should be represented has only come through a situation where we have something that has happened in the current life, not something that could happen in the future or like anything like that. This means that like there are also general things that we think that will never really like change in any way. Like let's say like do not murder and like do not steal and such. They in any way doesn't really change. But we think that specifically the rules that are going to be out of necessity are going to be the only rules that should be implemented. We also think that like as an intuition pump, we already like give religion a place because that it is seen as something that even if we don't really like see the value by ourselves, even if we don't really like consider it valuable, we will still, even if it will be the case, consider it important and worth saving because of people believe in it. All of our idea of how that we perceive the system of laws is around the notion that people are, that the will of the people is what it actually matters right now, and this is why that we should act. Even if it is something that we do not really see the actual change by. We also think like that the legislator has like scrutiny over it, which means that there is not really any harm for that. And we also think that only I actually know what I want, like as a principal case. And the country doesn't really know like generally what every person might in every situation find. This is not any knowledge that they can actually have or share, and therefore it is not something that can just be implemented by them as some kind of an impossible solution that will never anyway happen, and therefore I call you to oppose.
I would like to thank the speaker very much for this very fine speech and for the debate. I'm actually to call upon the Deputy Prime Minister here.
USA.
כן,
למה ככה שורפת אותי על וידאו?
אבל זה נכון.
Alright. Let's start. Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Wait, again. No, yeah, wait. Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I will start by clarifying why the major delta here is not strong democratic moral societies that they try to show, but actually weak societies without strong legal systems, or maybe not strong morals. There's no delta, basically almost no delta in strong societies. I will get to that later, but first let me do some rebuttal here. Look, there's an argument here that we're stuck with laws in the past, for example, like constitutional laws and stuff like that. These are not the laws we're talking about. We're talking about natural laws. We're stuck with them in the past, and therefore it's much harder to evolve into the future and update our laws. And they give us a lot of intuition pumps from examples from the past, like slavery and stuff as such. Okay, cool. I would like to take that argument and sort of flip it on its head, right? Natural laws are basic human rights, like, you know, sanctity of life, of liberty, freedom from religion, of religion and from religion, stuff like that, and etc. The past examples that are given here from OO are a perfect example of positive liberalisms, right? Because past societies suck. They didn't adhere to natural laws, and they adhered to positive legalism, and therefore their laws suck. They derive their laws from their terrible society, and therefore their laws suck. In our world, in the natural laws world, those laws wouldn't have passed because they don't adhere to the natural laws of humanity, like the sanctity of life and freedom that I talked about before. Therefore, their argument about that past society sucked and we wouldn't have been able to evolve from that, we say otherwise. We think we wouldn't have even got to that point. And because of positive legalism, we have gotten to that point where a terrible society made terrible laws because it was based on that society. Okay, let's get to my argument. Okay, we think that the actual delta of this motion in a functioning moral democracy is basically negligible, right? It's almost non-existent. Why? Because in a society that is moral and working, those morals and those ethics are translated into the laws in both sides, right? Because in our side, in the natural laws, those morals are already instilled and expressed in those laws in the way that the info slide said. And in the positive legalism side, because that society is the moral and ethical, therefore those laws are those morals and ethics are also expressed in their laws because they're expressed in societies like the info slide said. Where do we think there's actual delta and actual stuff to be a debate to be had in this motion? We think these are countries with rapid changes or with very weak legal systems, and why a natural law system is much better for those countries. Much better for those countries in aggregate. So what happens in times of crisis and rapid change? Right? Natural law is basically stronger because it is instilled in the very fabric of the society. It doesn't depend on society. That's the very point of this debate. Positive legalism, the morals are expressed through societies, but those laws are based on societies and they lean on that society. And once that society is either broken or changes very rapidly, those laws are either irrelevant anymore or they change very rapidly for those people. Therefore, in a society that is very weak legal-wise, that cannot administer their own laws, or that has rapid change, in our world, those basic laws are still inside those systems because you don't need some judge to express those laws because those laws are natural and expressed within humans as a whole, and therefore there's still a basic legal system in those countries that have a very weak legal system. But two, basic human rights are kept in times of rapid change. We see that all the time. When a country goes through rapid change, who's blamed? Usually minorities or you know, people who aren't in the majority. And that's exactly what government is trying to, opposition is trying to say, is that law should express the will of the majority of that country. But we say minorities have rights regardless of what the majority wants for that country. And those natural laws, those are the laws that keep that keep the rights of the minorities regardless of the rapid change that the majority wants or whatever whatever win they have right now. Before I continue, I will take a second.
Religion is above everything else is a natural law principle as per the info slide. But the question is, how do people actually react to these natural laws being in place?
These natural laws, I don't really understand the question, but I will just say that these natural laws are very basic. It's not natural law expressed in tax codes of companies. It's more human rights, you know, sanctity of life, of freedom and religion. I didn't really understand the question. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's talk about another part where this debate actually has data, which is changing societies. And we think that changing societies leads to inconsistent laws that change a lot, and this is bad for society, and I will explain why. In positive legalism, it is much easier to change the laws because it is easy to change societies because we see that all the time in history, right? A lot of times people come and they change the societies and only afterwards they start to change laws. I'll give some examples. For example, today in Israeli society, once you change the narrative of the rights of how you view, for example, Arabs, it's much easier to instill a law of death penalty towards terrorists. Or we see that, I won't say Germany, but you know, it's debate, so Germany. We see that it's easy to change society, and in natural law, it's much harder to change those laws because they're instilled in every fiber of humanity, and they don't depend on the society that is making those laws. Therefore, because what was it going to say? So what are the impacts of this? Why are the impacts of very strong natural laws that can't be changed? They say that it doesn't give to evolution. We say that those bad laws that they're trying to prevent never happen in our system. What are the impacts? One is, like I said, minorities, because those laws usually protect minorities from majority rule, mob rule, that they want to instill any whim, any great societal whim that now is trying to do. But another thing is that laws need to be consistent. That is why society depends on, right? Because people, lawyers, people, they decide, base their lives on past decisions. It's called stare decisis in legal terms. They need to know what is the precedent for the next laws. And if those laws change on a regular basis, because society is changing, and people don't know how to react to the laws that will be in the future, it's much harder for them to base their lives in the future. If they know that their rights will be kept, even if society takes a complete 180, their basic human rights will not be taken away from them, and their basic human rights are instilled in the very fiber of them being a human, and they don't depend on society. A change in society will not change their rights. We have shown that one, minorities have a better life in natural law. They lead to a better law because they're not subject to whims of society and majority mob rule, and that this is the actual delta of this debate, which is societies with weak legal laws, and not just a small delta of some philosophy in Great Sweden or whatever. These are the actual delta in this debate, and this is why we win the most, because we impact the lives of the most people, and also the people who are the most disenfranchised in society, and therefore we should win the debate. Thank you.
Very much for this very fine speech, and to continue the debate, I'm very happy to call upon the deputy leader of the opposition here.
ADU!
ADU! ADU!
זה הפשרה שניצחנו איתו לסקול.
I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Surprisingly, I'm going to have two crashes, principle and practical. Let's start with practical and explain why it's the most important in the debate and why we beat OG there. I want to tackle two things here. Firstly, I want to tackle people's rationality and whether they're good decision makers, because OG do that in DPM, and I think CG are also trying to do that. A couple of reasons why we think that people are generally rational and will be competent decision makers in voting for laws that they want to represent them in legislation generally. First, we think that they're scared of long-lasting precedent that may affect them. That is to say, if I know that canceling a certain right, like killing me or taking away my ability and my liberty, is something that will happen, this is something that really, really scares me. People are scared of uncertainty and tend to go towards more catastrophic cases, which means they're more which means that they're more likely to just not want to cancel basic things that they know will protect them, even if it means that right now there is no danger. They're scared of the paranoid case in which there may be. Secondly, because we think that right now, at this specific moment, we have history and past experiences to attest to the fact that when you don't have legal precedents, everything can happen, right? The Nazis can rise and can prosecute us. So when we don't have a legal system in place, we have history to defer to show us that that is a problem. So we want to set basic values and not oppress minorities even if we want to. That's why generally I think people are capable decision makers, and why all of their impacts on rights will change very, very quickly and very, very badly don't stand. But secondly, also notice that when it comes to dynamicacy, and I'm scared that in my lifetime the things will change, it's just unlikely that views change radically in this amount of time. So when I vote for a parliament that then legislates, probably the difference between parliaments is not going to be that big, to the extent that the voter base remains somewhat the same. So there isn't going to be big changes in legislation in my lifetime. With that out of the way, I want to get to why we think that on our side of the house, the benefits to people from the fact that it's not outdated constitutions that define legislation, but rather current laws is very, very big. And I want to be clear on this, because CG tried to ask us, but this can be change. No, you can. It's more likely that you change natural law. Problem is, OG concede you don't, right? Their entire case is predicated on the assumption that you act according to the laws that were already set. And then they say, no, but not necessarily. These laws were not necessarily set in the past and dark times. Here's why they were. An inherent part of the social contract is legalism, right? In order to bind ourselves together, we need to agree on certain norms that we will act on. We need to agree to not kill each other. This means that laws on their side of the house are set in a constitutional manner from the very, very early beginnings, right? This is why the US had a constitution very, very early on, like many other countries. This means that at their time, in the periods in which they are set, people are much much darker and much less enlightened and much less friendly to minorities than they will be now, and they're able to change that and like to vote on legislation that would make it different. Why is that true? Firstly, because as we told you, they have the past experience to rely on and to see that many, many bad things happen when you don't enshrine these rights and these really important things. But secondly, because we just think that general social trends tend toward enlightenment and toward more liberalism, right? Many things that are not related to this motion make it so we like acknowledge the LGBTQ plus IA and don't think anymore that African Americans are 3/5 of a person, which means that we generally tend towards better narratives for many, many other reasons that I think are just reality. Cool. For that reason, I think that we already win them there when we just prove a better practical benefit for people, given that these constitutional decisions are made better on our side of the house. I want to add two more reasons that I think don't get engaged for why, independent of like elitism and minorities, I think that also a lack of dynamicy in laws is really, really problematic. Firstly, we tell you that in terms of technology and socioeconomic developments, this means the difference between like a constitution that was set with the idea in mind that I should be able to bear arms because I now need to protect myself from people that are raiding my house, to now having a functional police because we have money and we have taxing and not needing that anymore. Yet, because of OG's precedent, because of the fact that they tell you on their side natural law will be gospel, at that point I'm unable to undo that because it seems like natural law. It seems like things that I don't want to cancel and shouldn't cancel. For that reason, I think that this means we get at least really big delays in canceling things that are no longer essential for our country and are in active harm on it, right? Panel, this is literally dead babies' impact in shootings in America, right? When you keep on like relying on laws that are outdated on, like, for example, right to property in the US, that doesn't take into account wealth inequalities and differences that happen because of technological and socioeconomic changes in this country. Two ways then for why this is the most important impact in this debate, certainly within the practical clash. Firstly, because I think that we show to you with certainty that these laws on prop side of the house will not be able to reflect, right? Countries and societies necessarily change, which means laws necessarily won't reflect the values there. But secondly, because it's also a principal harm independent of the practical, right? When a law is not reflective of the people that are alive right now, there's no legitimacy for its power. The only reason that the state and the court gains legitimacy is if it represents the people right now. But if it acts on a moral framework that is not representative of people right now, it may be just any other set of values, any other coercive set of values that is entirely random and it is not set according to what we want right now. Which comfortably leads me into the principle, but before I do that, I'll take a second house.
How does this legal system look in reality?
I don't know. Let's talk about the principle. I think that Oren gives you a few things here. Firstly, I think that the first and most important mechanism for why necessarily only the wish of the people is what indicates morality, and there's nothing independent from that, is the fact that the state and the word of the court can never look into my mind and know what it is that I want. For that reason, we think that people should be able to vote, because only they know how to self-actualize and achieve agency to the greatest extent. Similarly, the state doesn't know what's best. It doesn't know what's most essential for people, neither do any legislators in the country. This is why we think that only people are able to know what's best for them, to like decide between the urgency of things and like say what's the most important thing for them. Secondly, because I really think that, I won't take you, that there is no normative value in adhering to a set of values that no one benefits from, right? This is the flip side of that argument. That is to say, if we all started praying to the wall, but none of us have religious beliefs that are enshrined in the wall, none of us want to pray to the wall, then no one is gaining any value from praying to the wall. This means that necessarily, in order to have any value from a legal system, you will have to have people adhering to it and wishing it and supporting it. What do we think then that this means on their side of the house? It means that, and then intuition comes like religion. I think Oren already does that. I think that the reason why it will be reflective on our side of the house well is because this motion is set in the present, right? This means that on our side of the house, we can say that legislators like the parliament necessarily reflect the wish of the people and then make legislation based on that. For that reason, we are reflective of the people's wishes and we answer this necessary principle metric. This is the most important impact in this debate panel, because even if you're not sure at this point in the debate what happens in the practical, whether it's bad or not, a guaranteed impact is that at some points, as PM flags out, the difference in this debate is that you won't appeal to what people want. At that point, you would be rendering the entire legal justice system immoral, to the extent that you wouldn't be acting on what people want and just act and just like an exercise of power that is illegitimate. For all those reasons, what is us?
Speech and open the opening house for a fun debate thus far, and to open the second house of the debate. I'm very happy to call upon the member of government here.
Okay, I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. First half argued about whether we're going to get more minority rights, less minority rights. I'm going to do something very simple. Not just more minority rights is good. I'm going to explain specifically why we're going to get, in general, better laws which are more right, which treat people better and all of that. My case is going to be very simple. I'm going to explain why on our side the courts are going to be more involved, they're going to get more power, going to make more decisions, and why they are going to make better decisions regardless if it's going to be minority rights. In general, better decisions which will treat people better and all that. If I'll have time, I'll talk about why we're going to have more patriotism for close communities and why is it great. Let's begin. So, why are the courts going to take more charge and take more power? Right? We're saying that in opposition side, the government is the one that represents the will of the people, what the people think is right and all that, or at least this is what people are taught, right? In both sides of the house, we're taught that the parliament is the house that represents the will of the people. The parliament has members from of the government who represent each constituency and all of that. We were saying that this is what kids learn, and in addition, people learn that the law that is right is the law that represents the will of the people. Notice that the combination of the law that is right is the law that represents the will of the people, and the parliament is the one that represents the will of the people, means that arguments that, of course, what I'm doing is right, I'm the one that was chosen by the people, I have legitimacy from the people, so this is why my actions are right, are arguments that are getting caught. This is like all of the arguments that we're seeing in today's Knesset and all that. We're saying that there is more legitimacy for those arguments. The politicians have more legitimacy to do whatever they want just because they have the will of the people to back them up and all that. We're saying that in the comparative, in our side, what's important is not what the will of the people says, is what the people deserve, what are their rights. And we're saying this is what the courts represent, right? We're saying that hurting the will of the people, hurting what the majority decide is something that is less important, and the justice system, the system that is based on what was previously and what are the rights that philosophers and all that decided is going to be much stronger. So, with that said, why is the government a worse body to decide what should be the laws and why the courts are better? Pressure groups. We're saying that we have a lot of groups who are influencing the government and actually make the government even worse at representing the will of the people, although it is perceived that way, right? We're saying that pressure groups means first people who are just very strong-minded and are willing to risk everything and go and actually try and change. We are talking mainly about people who are in a way a bit fanatic. We're saying people who are masses of people are going and investing a lot of time and research in that. We're talking about mainly a close community because in order to gather those masses, you need some kind of control over them. So we're talking about evangelicals, we're talking about the Hasidim in Israel. Notice that those groups have unproportional representation, and this is why, even though the majority wants abortion, for example, we don't have them. This is why women's rights and all that, although the majority wants, we don't get this. We're saying that because we're saying that it's much likelier that the government, that the courts will actually grant those rights, but we're saying that because the parliament is so screwed, we don't get this because of those pressure groups that are making sure that the will of the people, what the representatives make, are going to make this decision, which is going to screw people over. Secondly, pressure groups of money, lobbyism, right? We're saying that in order to succeed in politics, you need a lot of money, right? In order to campaign for rallies, in order to do call centers, in order to do TV ads, in order to do surveys and understand what the people want and how to catch their attention and all that. We're saying that this is where companies come and actually influence the politics in a terrible way. This is why gun companies in the US are coming and influencing what the laws is going to be and influencing what the representatives are going to do and influencing the will of the people, right? We're saying that this is why the big companies like Amazon and all that are going to go and lobby for less workers' rights and all of that. We're saying that on our side, the courts are not going to be influenced by those lobbies, by those pressure groups. They are not going to be influenced. They don't need this money. They don't need to do campaigns, and we're going to get better laws. But secondly, we're saying that we're going to have better discussion before I move into it. I'll take second half. First half.
I think CG are confused about the fact that it's the directly elected parliament, not the coalition that is the legislative entity. But besides, the media in a functional democracy is there to watch over that lobbyism doesn't happen. Why is it at all likely?
Okay, first, we're saying that yes, they are the legislative body, but we're saying that in our side they'll have the court will have more power to come and say, no, this is an unlawful law and you can't make it, which is something that happens very rarely in our today, but we want this to happen much more. So let's get into it. So we're saying that in politics, deep discussions are rarely done. All that happens is populism, right? We're saying that we get you need to get those newspaper headlines. You need to have this big slogans in order to catch the viewers. You can't actually have deep discussion because nobody's actually going to listen to all of it. No one. Not many people are into listening to an hour of debating and all of that. We're saying that this is why you don't have a very good discussion about pro-choice, pro-life. You only have those two slogans and all of that. We're saying that on our side, you'll have better discussion to understand actually how it influences all of the people and understand how it's going to influence the people in the future. Because notice that precedents are something that are symmetric in both sides, but in our case side, we are actually going to understand and study what are the likely precedents that you're going to set, how it's going to influence the future law and all of that. This is something that you need to have this deep discussion. This is something that you don't have in politics. Notice we'll get more consistent law because of that. We get better law because of that, because you're going to understand how it influences each actor and not just the big stuff that everyone is going to listen to. To conclude, we're saying the courts will have more power, and this is something that is great because the courts are going to make better decisions. For all those reasons, please propose.
I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1, and. I find it very, very, very sad that my own clubmates don't defend that natural law is a real thing in a motion about fucking natural law. The only metric in this debate is utilitarianism, because at the point that is what side government defended, they never actually prove a principle, only people are heard, and to the point that side of OO concedes that the practical is more important than the principle. At the beginning of Amitai speech, I will wait till the practical is better than principle. Direct quote, we believe that this is what is the most important thing. We will first of all explain Kiri's extension, then OG, then CG, then if we're preparing for war, it's time to do Irish whips. Okay, so let's start with Kiri's extension. Kiri tells you a very basic thing. At the point at which utilitarianism is the most basic system, natural law hurts a lot of, is the most basic system and metric in this debate. Natural law hurts a lot of the ability in order to do so. Why? CG tells us utilitarianism may be a metric, but no, it is unlikely that all natural law systems will generate in the way that utilitarianism is the greatest metric. To the extent that most natural law systems, as claimed by OG, have human rights or are based on religious law, based on any other principle, it is likely that utilitarianism is not a leading principle in these rights in the majority of cases, especially when most of them, and this CG does not rebut, and OO tells you, have been established like 1,000 years ago, where people are more deontological than today and before the rise of utilitarianism. To that extent, that what we tell you is very, very, what Kiri brings to are two simple points. One, the legal system is far, far, far worse in actually protecting the rights of the people. First, in actually ensuring that the people are happy, satisfied, good. Two reasons behind that. First of all, because of the fact that it is harder to change in many conditions where you need drastic changes, where you need actually to sacrifice the minority for the will of the majority. To that, Yale gives you two responses. One, minorities are sacrificed. I don't give a fuck. I think that supporting the most people and bringing the most happiness to the world is very good. I think that happy people are in general good and we accept it as a whole of society. I don't understand why minorities are uniquely important. Nobody met that ever as to why I should care about minorities more than the majority necessarily, except for saying human rights, minority rights, and all of that. But secondly, Yale's second response is that it is easier to do that because you don't need to understand the will of the people. Note again, the entire point is that it's easier to change on our side because you're not bound to any specific principle. If understanding what the people want right now is terrible, then discard that in favor of just doing what is good and what is most likely to reach the utilitarian result. You can always discard the system, you can always change it because it is not set in stone and you don't have to go into any principles hurting utilitarianism. But secondly, it is about clearer laws. To that, Yale says, oh, murder and is bad and all of that are clear laws. Directly note that a lot of times human rights do go and tag with each other. What in the was already said, for example, mask mandates, which protect the right for you for healthcare and safety against the right of all of that. To that extent, note that OG concede in a POI clarification that this is up to judges and that they are the ones who are going to decide. So this mechanism necessarily must stand at the point of clarification judges that instead of having the law clear, it stands. Then Yale says, oh, but you get inconsistency because the law constantly changes. No, the fact that the law constantly changes doesn't mean that it has gray zone, just it constantly changes. People can still easily follow the laws if it changes a lot of the time, if the law is clear, which you get on our side. Second extension, which is part of the entire debate, is about following the law, is about following the law in the first place, because to the extent of proof that people follow less laws that they don't understand, they don't care about, that they think they do not represent them and what they want and what they are going to get, then we prove to you that they're not going to follow law generally, know that all teams in the debate want law to be followed generally, the people will be protected, that their basic rights which law guarantees will be placed. So to that extent, this is prior to most of the debate. Let's start with direct rebuttals on OG. OG give you two cases. One, human rights are good, so we want them. Two responses to that. One, to the extent that human rights are good, we also support the existence of human rights. We think that legal positive systems are in fact designed to, are supposed to be designed in general to encompass the will of the state, which is the will of the people in democratic countries. But secondly, note that OG cannot run away from the fact that they define this as human rights for no reason. I quote to you the info slide. The only thing about moral, legal, natural law is fundamental moral principles and ethical values which are bound to the system. Lior said that these values are within the clash. The OG never explained to you why these values are the human rights that they want, and not say religious values, not say the values that America was founded on, which are that white people are inherently and morally superior to that. I know that OG has already said that. I think this is saying more eloquently, more directly against them, and make more directly against them, quoting the info slide and all to explain to you that this is very, very, very bad, and this is also a fundamental flaw in the case, so we can also say it. Secondly, OG tells you about weak countries, but note that both of Kiri's extension answer that. First of all, because weak countries oftentimes need to do drastic changes to go against the laws. Note the fact that the country is weak and about to collapse, as per Omar says, isn't like a gift from God or something, right? It's probably because the country has a bad legal system or problems within it, which are far easier to change and control on our side, and also reform to be stronger. But secondly, it is the fact that the people are unlikely to follow these laws in the first place. Like, if the country system is so weak and the people don't think like it represents them because it's stuck in natural laws, why are they even going to follow the law or care about it? To that extent, we think that the fact that it can change its laws at least means that people can follow them to an extent, that they feel they represent them to an extent, and thus they get protection instead of using civil disobedience against the law falling down, saving as well. And the terrible crime that have skyrocketed there. Before we continue, OG.
A good legal system follows laws written by the legislature, otherwise it's just a dictatorship of the Supreme Courts. Courts that are bound to laws based on natural law guarantees basic human rights, regardless of the forever changing societies.
Okay, all of the answers to that, we have no clue why courts why courts are likely to follow natural laws, but note that the laws passed by the legislature are likely to be somewhat contained under natural law, again because there are principles that the legislature must follow first. This is an entire case when you have no principles, you can act the most utilitarian fashion way. CG, first of all, they tell you court systems are likely to be stronger. No, there is a strong justification for court systems under the positivist stance. Simply the fact that people want human rights, want them to be protected in general, and the will of the people is for human rights to be protected in general. That's the actual explanation behind the Supreme Court in Israel, which talks about stuff such as plausibility, which aren't either human rights or like natural law things. These are just things that Oren Bareket added because of what he wanted, or see the United States Supreme Court, which also acts on that when it's completely political and nobody cares about fundamental constitutional principles anymore. So we don't understand what's delta here. But they also never explain to you why that court is better. Because Karni first two mechanisms, which are lobbyism and lobbyism, again, like pressure groups and lobbyism, are completely symmetrical to the extent that judges are also pressured, except for donations specifically, because most states have donor laws, which is very marginal because donor laws exist. But as a flip note, the judges are far more likely to be pressured because they are private citizens, because they cannot be saponida or like files a lot of the time. Politicians at least have to adhere to the will of the people, at least have to put through them, and at least have to listen to them, and they can get voted out in the next election. They have to act too corrupt. Judges a lot of the time don't have that pressure on them. A lot of Supreme Courts and boards are sadly corrupt. But lastly, they talk to you about better discussion within the Supreme Court. Note that discussion only happens when you're open to discussion. When natural law exists, there is no reason to talk the impacts on everyone or whatever Karni tells you. The only reason we want to have this in-depth discussion is when you're talking about positivism, when you can just change the law based on what is currently better, how people are actually impacted, what is the in reality. This will get far more on our side when the Supreme Court takes the positivist stance. We just said we're going to be systematic. We're just going to talk about plausibility, about what is best for the state and what is the current laws. For all of these reasons, call it to propose. Thank you very much.